Was the debate that led to, well, we'll see what happened. Welcome to Agree or Disagree the podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at KVULE. You can subscribe to Agree or Disagree the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. Like Agree or Disagree the podcast on Facebook, or check out the website, kevinolenek.com. I sounded very radio-y there. Oh well. Tonight, as we are just recording this, we are about 2 hours after the debate happened in Alberta, the Alberta debate, which I think because of what happened this week with Jason Kenney's interview on Charles Adler and Mark Smith, I think that there was some anticipation that there would be some fireworks and we would have a really interesting conversation coming out of this. What I don't know if we did or we didn't, we will have some things to review. Joining me is the podcast hosts. Wait a minute. Sorry, I had a little bit of a glitch there. Of the podcast hosts of Political R&D, Robbie Kreger-Smith. How are you?
Doing good, thanks, Kevin. How are you?
Great. And Deidre Mitchell, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Kevin. How are you?
Great. I think that I feel like we do need to take this a step back before we get into the debate. And I don't want to get into, I think we could maybe talk a little bit about Mark Smith, but I think what was more that caught everybody's attention here was Jason Kenney being on Charles Adler show yesterday. It was an interview that was an interview across the country. Charles Adler, a pretty well-known conservative, as he has been quoted as saying there's not a single bit of NDP in his DNA, challenging Jason Kenney on what has happened within his party. Why I'm using Charles Adler's words, not for those that are going to get angry at me. Using Charles Adler's words, why are the knuckle draggers attracted to your party? Kenny getting frustrated. I think we need to start there because after that was the Rachel Notley interview. What were kind of your takeaways from that interview? What were your thoughts? And did that conversation in this week have any expectation or weight on what you were thinking this debate would be about?
Yeah, I don't think they spent as much time on it as I was kind of anticipating going into the debate. But I think that was probably a good thing because the rhetoric has been so strong and the campaigns thus far has been very divisive. And I think that there would be some strategic risk in spending too much time focused in and honing in on that.
And I would say, I don't know that it provided any additional ammunition. I would say that, honestly, what we got from the Charles Adler interview was essentially what we have seen from Jason Kenney the entire time. I will give Adler so much credit for trying to pull that out of Jason Kenney. And I've had the conversation a couple of times today with people saying, I thought I thought he really went after Kenney and I thought maybe it was a little much. But the thing is that I think Charles Adler is a friend of Jason Kenney's, considers him a friend. And I think that came not from a place of animosity, but almost a place of, please prove everybody wrong. Prove me wrong. I really think that's where it was coming from. And Kenney did not do that.
Yeah, it was interesting. Charles made the comment like, knock, knock, what have you done with my friend Jason Kenney? And so I think to a certain extent, Adler has been quite a defender of Jason Kenney and a promoter and booster of him. And I think that he's facing a little bit of buyer's remorse. I don't know if that's the right word, but probably the closest that I could give, just because he had an image or a perception of what Jason Kenney and his values were, and Kenney's actions in not punting this Mark Smith candidate don't really align with what his perceived values of Kenney's are. And so there's a little bit of a reconciliation going on.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I mean, I don't think that Adler was unfair at all. He gave Kenney as much avenue as possible to, to use a Christian phrase here, repent, apologize for a number of the things that he has said in the past. Specifically, when he was asked about the comments that Mark Smith made, I didn't feel that he answered that very well. He sounded very nervous.
Was it also because he said that was the first time he'd heard the recording?
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's.
Everybody was listening to it. I heard it probably 4 or 5 times before it was played again for Jason Kenney. And come on.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
Yeah. Charles Adler appeared on the Ryan Jesperson show today to kind of recap that interview. And the comment that Adler made was, Kenney is one of the most well-prepared people I know, and I'm not going to call him a liar, but his claim to have not heard the sermon strains credulity. And then he said, it's bullshit.
Yeah. Oh,
so,
I'm running a campaign. I'm trying to become premier. One of my candidates is being absolutely slayed on social media, but, I haven't really heard it yet.
Yeah. And I'm going to stand by him even though I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that's really weird for somebody who wants to be the premier of the province is, by all polling and accounts, is going to be the next premier of the province. To go into an interview like that, he had to have known the night before about Ryan Jesperson's diatribe on the Adler show. He had to think that he was going to go in there and get grilled. And so it either betrays a sense of arrogance that he didn't think Adler would actually do his job as a journalist and hold him to account and ask tough questions, or it just really shows how incompetent he is, that he could go in that underprepared and expect that softballs would be lobbed at him. And the one thing I do have to say about Charles Adler is he's been a consistent ally to the LGBTQ community. He is a strong fiscal conservative, and my belief is he's tired of having opportunities for conservatives to advance their policy agenda because conservative leaders, particularly like Jason Kenney, aren't prepared to put these divisive social questions aside. And somebody made the comment the other day that, why are we talking about this? Why is this important? Why can't we talk about pipelines and jobs? As a gay man, I want nothing more than us to have a conversation about pipelines and jobs. But every opportunity that a conservative party gets close to power, these issues start to come up and they start to pander to their base. And they're the ones that are bringing it up. And I don't know if they just think that they can bring it up over and over again and that the gay community is going to roll over and just accept that our rights are going to be stripped from us, but that's not going to happen. So if you want to talk about economy and jobs and pipelines, talk about it and drop the crap with GSAs and listen to what the gay community says about what they need in terms of protecting their rights. And when you do that, then you can advance your policy agenda and not get stuck into these divisive social issues, which you consistently lose on.
Well said. Well said. My next question here, maybe we'll kind of go through all of this, but what was interesting tonight, just before we recorded, Blair Brown was on the Charles Adler show, and she felt, and I'll get to Rachel Notley here in a long pathway, but she felt that tonight, and she tweeted basically, Jason Kenney felt a bit more premier, and it's amazing how you can sound when you get away with lying. My question about Rachel Notley tonight is, as I'm thinking about this a little bit more, this was not the 2015 debate Rachel Notley. This felt like a much more I'm going to use the word overconfident. And almost in a sense, she felt like she had this not necessarily wrapped, but she didn't do as well as I think people were expecting. Is that a fair comment?
I think so.
Yeah, everybody I watched the debate with and all the commentary I was seeing online from nonpartisan sources said that it looked like a different premier. It looked like she felt a little bit worn down, perhaps, and she just wasn't on her A game. And Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley should have won this debate, and in my view, they were the bottom two.
I do agree with you on that they were the bottom two, and it felt to me that Notley came in maybe thinking she had the home run already because of the interview with Jason Kenney. That she really will get more into the social issues in a little bit here, because I did see an interesting tweet that I think a couple of things there, but she did not push Jason Kenney on those issues as much as I think everyone expected her to. In my mind.
Yeah. Go ahead, Deidre.
I don't think that she did, but what I would have preferred to have seen was, and this is a conversation I keep having, you don't get moderate conservative votes by attacking conservatives on social issues. You get moderate conservative votes by attacking them on economic issues, and it's the exact opposite for, Kenney can attack on social issues. That makes the premier look bad. Whereas attacking her on economic issues, it solidifies his base, but it doesn't really move any dial. So I really would have preferred to see her attack more of his economic policy than she did. But I mean, when she went for the leadership stuff, my jaw dropped. Now, she's a lawyer. I'm sure she knows what she's allowed to say, but wow. When she went after him on that, I was like, that might be a good one, because again, a moderate conservative may not be as concerned about the social issues, more concerned about the economy, but also very concerned about corruption.
Blair Brown felt that was that Kenney was let off a little bit there.
Yeah, I think he didn't get it as bad as political observers expected. But again, I think it goes back to the comments that I've made about the things I'm hearing, that people are really tired of the attacks and the vitriol and the animosity. And so I think there was a strategic restraint that was demonstrated really by both Kenney and Notley in terms of not really going for the jugular. And in the leadership debate, the challenge is, how do you land a knockout punch while also looking statesmanlike? And that, for me, as a person who felt politically homeless in the last election, was kind of what, in my eye, showed Rachel Notley was the winner of the debate, is that she landed some really good body blows, coupled with Jim Prentice coming across as being very condescending. And she just didn't do that, and neither did Kenney this time. In my view, there was no no real knockout punch from anybody. I think there was a strategic decision to show a little bit of restraint so that they didn't look like they were just malicious attack dogs. And even with that restraint, like, they're definitely not at the peak of what I've seen either of them to be. They still looked like the children in the room.
Yeah, the adults in the room were David Kahn and Stephen Mandel. Let's start with, what did we think overall of Stephen Mandel's performance? What worked with him, and was there anything that you felt he could have done better?
So personally, and I know this is superficial, but politics is image. His suit jacket really didn't fit, which was odd to me.
I've heard
because there's this perception that he's like Mr. Burns, and that reinforced it. It seemed a little bit odd to me that he didn't have his bow tie on, which is kind of his brand. But I think, again, that from an image perspective, that may have been an attempt to try and make him a little bit more folksy or relatable. But my expectations for Stephen, as somebody who knows him well and has worked with him closely, were really to go in there and make a couple of sharp comments about Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley and both their records, and to lay out a bit of a vision in terms of policy for what he would do for Alberta. And on that front, I think that Mr. Mandel did a really good job. He went in there and he was able to talk about what it was he wanted to do in terms of policy, and didn't really get too into the weeds when it came to the personal attacks. There was definitely a couple missteps for me. I think that he should have been better prepared to answer the question about rejecting funding for the opioid addiction treatments. That was something that he did towards the end of his term as PC Health Minister. And he should have known that that was coming and been prepared with a really good answer for that. The comment about you must be smoking something when David Kahn went in on Greg Clark allegedly saying that the Alberta Party wanted to privatize healthcare was a little bit quippy and maybe a little bit juvenile, but I think it changed the conversation quickly. But that's just an outright lie. Like, Greg Clark hasn't done any radio interviews. I spoke to his campaign team tonight since the campaign started. So where David Kahn got that, I don't know. And obviously it threw Stephen a little bit off as well. But overall, I thought with Notley and Kenney really kind of screaming at each other and talking over each other, Stephen did a really good job of maintaining his composure, looking like the adult in the room, presenting an overall reasonable case for why he's a better choice.
I think so too. There wasn't too much that I had expected. I did expect him to work to differentiate the Alberta Party's vision from the NDP and from the UCP. I think he did that. The overall commentary that I have seen has been positive. I think in some, I like when he gets personal. That, to me, is his strongest point. That's something that we don't get to see a lot publicly. I've seen it privately as well, and I think he has a great demeanor, and I enjoy talking with him. I've seen him be very easygoing, and he's a funny guy, but I don't get to see that much in his public appearances. So when he talked about why he's doing this, that that it's because of a 6-year-old, that resonates with people, I think.
Yeah, when he talked about his grandkid at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I that was pretty poignant. And he got off to a really good start, saying with his quote is you don't have to choose one or the other. We can have both. And I do feel that quote resonates with most Albertans. I think most Albertans want both. Uh, does it hurt or help that there was a few times that Jason Kenney, when Mandel was speaking, said, yes, yes, that's right. That's right. Does that help or hurt him?
I think it actually helps him because what he's trying to do is he's trying to attract soft center left NDP supporters and soft center right UCP supporters, and people who maybe feel that they've compromised their values a little bit in voting for either of them. And so, one in particular that stood out is Stephen talked about we need to absolutely look after class sizes kindergarten to grade 12, but we need to think about early education and how we set students up for success in K to 12. And then we need to think about how do we increase participation in post-secondary education. And that's when Jason Kenney jumped in and said, yes, you're right. And I actually thought it was David Kahn at first. And I was a little taken aback and had to ask the people, like, which person said that? So I thought that was good. And when you start to get agreement on that and demonstrate that you understand the issues and they appeal to other leaders from other parties and other ideologies, then that's kind of the sweet spot you want to be in.
I would completely agree. Yeah, I think it benefits him because of the position that he's in, right? Because he's in that center position. So it wouldn't have mattered if it was Rachel Notley or if it was the UCP. I mean, it does seem that he's moving over to a little bit more of that center right that might be looking at the UCP. And so for Kenney to say absolutely, I agree, that would perk up anyone who was looking straight to Jason Kenney. So I think I don't think that hurts him in any way.
The reason I'm asking if it helped or hurt is because there were some people that were critical of Kenney agreeing with Mandel and not agreeing and treating Notley in terms of just personal behavior. I did see that on Twitter as well. What about David Kahn?
I thought David came into this debate. I've had some interactions with David online or via social media. I've met him once or twice in person. Unfortunately, to the average person, like I was talking to a friend before the debate, and they actually said, "Oh, we still have a Liberal Party in Alberta."
Oh.
And so just understanding on that level the awareness and the weakness of the brand, the bar was really low for David, and he very, very much exceeded it. Even if it wasn't a low bar, I still think that he did a really good job. David is very intelligent. He knows the issues. He's done his homework, with the exception of Greg Clark wanting to privatize healthcare. And he just, I thought he was composed, and he's obviously a constitutional lawyer who likes to lay pipe.
And maybe smoke some stuff on the side that's now legal.
Yep.
No, I agreed as well. I think that David Kahn put forward he had some strong policy to also stand upon. So that was just a benefit to his policy development teams, because he was able to really use that and move forward with it. Like it provided him, like Robbie said, the bar wasn't that high to begin with, but when you can stand on policy that is really strong, well, then, you just your boost was already above the bar to begin with. So I think he I think he did a really good job. He's a good speaker, and it wouldn't surprise me to find out that there were a number of people surprised by his performance.
I've interviewed him before. I've met with him before. He's a really good guy, a really intelligent guy. I do know that he's been trying to keep this on a policy level. I thought tonight he kept everything at a very much a policy level. Um, I thought actually, to me, if I was to go with a pipeline policy, I tweeted this. I'm between what the Alberta Party is thinking and what David Kahn is thinking. I actually think those are the two better ways to go, other than Kenny's war with anyone that doesn't agree with him, and whatever Notley is thinking of doing. I felt that those were more reasonable approaches. And he was the only one that brought up the consultation with First Nations when it came to the pipelines, which I found that to be interesting. And I want to read what Bashir Muhammad tweeted during the debate. And I know that this is a man that some people like or don't like, but I'm just going to read this, and we can kind of debate and go from there. But I think there's something interesting to say here. It's amazing to see Dave Kahn straight up call for the end of carding. The fact is that he's the only leader willing to talk about and address systematic racism. Remember, Notley killed the provincial carding review, and her anti-racism report was months late. It's disappointing seeing so many NDP supporters pretend that they have a good record on racial justice. The fact is that it's all talk, and they are afraid to do anything tangible. I think he meant to write do anything tangible. That could be a mistype there. I could be wrong, but I do feel like Dave Kahn separated himself from everybody else in terms of providing a bit of a balance to some things that we have been talking about. And I feel like he was the only one that really delved into that part of it myself. I don't know what you think there, but...
Yeah, no, I agree. And I would say, like, if I was to define the Liberal brand, the Alberta Liberal brand, it's been one of, very thoughtful policy making, very good people who are stymied by the brand. And, if you were to put a complete rebrand, not calling it Liberal Alberta, but a complete rebrand on that policy and those people, and put them into a different party, they would be far more successful than they are. And obviously, David is a homosexual leader. He's a racialized person. He understands the issues from a personal perspective as well. And so when you have that personal connection and perspective to it, I think that obviously you're more sensitive to those things. And it's part of the reason why the policy in those areas is so thoughtful.
Yeah. I honestly just think that he had some excellent ground to work from, and he did it well. He showcased the policy that the Liberal Party is putting forward in, he's, like I said, he's a good speaker. He's kind of thoughtful when he speaks. I don't think that he does attacking well. I don't think it doesn't look good on him. Some people can. It comes across as witty, or it comes across as, I guess, anything better. But on him, I don't think it looks good. So as long as he sticks to the issues, to the policy, to as long as he sticks to that, I think it's very good. I think he reads very well when he's doing that. But when he goes down, I don't think it doesn't look good on him.
Yeah, he did have he fumbled with the Mandel challenge there. He certainly did fumble there, but I was overall quite impressed with him overall in terms of that, and I do think he'll be a great. And even Rachel Notley acknowledged the work that he's done, and I do think that they are bringing up some issues that the UCP and the NDP haven't brought up as much, and I do hope he gets a seat. I hope that there's a couple of, I am hoping that there for the Alberta Party and the Liberal Party get at least 4 or 5 seats. I mean, maybe I'm being over dramatic here or something, but I do think having that presence in there, I think, would be such a benefit to what's happening in Alberta. So I'm hoping for that at least. Who knows what's going to happen? Yeah.
Very selfishly, I actually hope that he doesn't, not because he doesn't belong there, but I think that's the only way in which the center is going to unite, is if the Liberals or the Alberta Party are wiped off the map and then they're forced into cooperating. I just don't think there's room for two parties in the center. And if you were to put that vote together and the talent of the two groups together, I just think, you'd probably be 17 to 20% in the polls right now, and it would be a real horse race. It's going to be interesting to see the next 2-3 days, but they're just so close in terms of on the ideological spectrum that one of the parties has to go at some point.
Yeah, I see your point there for sure, but
that being said, I think David's thoughtful. I think he'd make a great MLA. There's no doubt that he's intelligent and would do a good job representing his constituents.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of chatted a little bit about Notley, but I want to go back to this a little bit and kind of keeping in theme with Bashir Muhammad's thought process. Specifically here, it's the tweet. It's disappointing seeing so many NDP supporters pretend that they have a good record on racial justice. The fact is that they're all talking. They're afraid to take or do anything tangible. I actually think that the weakest point of Rachel Notley tonight was on the social issues. And that actually really surprised me. But overall, it wasn't even so much I guess she's trying to be proud of their record. She didn't necessarily push Kenney, and maybe I'll ask Deidre this first. What did you think of her answer to the sexual misconduct question?
Oh, that's their Achilles heel. I've heard rumors of what they might be. I've had conversations about what that might mean. I guess as well, if I look at, and this requires a lot more analysis than just what did that look like on the surface, right? What did it look like on the surface? It looked like deflecting. It looked like a bit of an excuse, not really supporting survivors type thing. And that's where the additional analysis kind of comes in. Like, we don't have all the facts. The ones that I have are definitely third hand, so I don't have any information that I can say this is exactly what it is. But for the party itself to have done what they did with their third-party investigator, I'm sure that lawyers were involved, for the conversations to have gone on and for them to have decided afterwards that this wasn't something that will break the people involved, it makes me feel like it shouldn't, and if it shouldn't, then they should have made it public. But I don't know what the thought process around it was. Um, like I said, the way that it came across was, I mean, definitely not strong because, again, that just goes back to what do you attack a progressive on? You attack them on progressive values, and that is something that they are absolutely vulnerable with. Is that 2 MLA thing or three? I don't know. I saw a couple of tweets that suggested there were more. So yeah, it was just, I don't know. It was unfortunate, but there's no way that she can't really. She has nothing to stand on with it.
Well, today there was a tweet about Craig Coulihan editing a book
Oh, I saw that.
in 2004. And there were a tweet, and the man that posted the tweet has said he will take it down if this was cleared, involving Joe Cece and minors.
Yeah.
And as of right now, that tweet is still up. So, and these two conversations did not come up in the debate. I don't know. I'm not saying that these are I'm not going to speculate on anything else, but those were topics that came up today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought her answer was weak, and I do have some inside information that comes from people in the Premier's office. And so there are truth to the allegations. The NDP caucus has admitted that there was at least 2 cases that were reported and that investigations affirmed that there was improper sexual conduct. They claim of a non-criminal nature. The problem is that they're asking everybody to trust them. And when you have a vested interest in the outcome of those investigations, there's a clear conflict of interest. And so I think that that's why people don't trust them, that there's nothing to see there. And when the question gets asked, you can see that it knocks her a little bit off of her kilter, and that she gets flustered, and that she's really trying to stay on those talking points, that it's about the victims not wanting to come forward or be exposed. Doing things like saying these candidates have not been allowed to run, they are not running for us during this election, would address that without having to disclose names. Doing things like releasing the reports from the supposed independent investigators with names and details redacted might do some things to try and alleviate some of the controversy. But the unfortunate thing is that for all of presumably the men in the NDP candidate slate who are up for re-election have a bit of a cloud over their head because of the way that the NDP's handled this. And there's this clear delineation between the rhetoric that they use around believing women and around supporting them, and the actions that they've taken in the way that it's been handled. And those are further exacerbated by feedback from Robin Luff, who left the NDP caucus and initially exposed those claims, and by other feedback from staffers who've left the NDP caucus. And so it's only a matter of time. It's going to come out eventually. When people's jobs aren't on the line, they're going to start to talk. And if the NDP loses this election, there's going to be, my guess is probably 2 or 3 MLAs or former MLAs who are going to really have their reputations tarnished when those details do come out.
And it's really interesting because I asked the question on Twitter if did she answer the question, and the conservatives people said nope, and both the NDP supporters were, well, it's about privacy. She absolutely answered the question. She answered the question great. They had no problems with that because it's really about the privacy for the victims. And I I mean, I don't like. I think for anyone that is not necessarily a Notley supporter, I don't know if they came away with that answer of feeling very comfortable with that. Especially the problem comes when, rightly or wrongly, and mostly rightly, you are challenging the ethics and the questions of the UCP party with what has been going on within the party, which is fair game, and you have some issues about people within your own party. If you're an undecided voter or you're not sure, I would think that you were coming across a bit confused with what is the difference between what's going on in the UCP party and what's going on in the NDP party. Like,
I would absolutely.
and maybe they're not exactly the same, but
Yeah, I mean, this is going to come across a little bit callous, but sexual misconduct and sexual abuse by people in positions of power has been, in my estimation, a problem probably as long as civilization has been around. The problems that you're seeing prop up in the UCP right now are a little more intimately tied to Islamophobia, white supremacy, and candidates that are expressing support for those views. And those have been a lot more underground and a lot less prevalent for probably about 25 or 30 years. And so, partially because these candidates have been stupid enough to put these views out into the ether where they're very publicly accessible, it's been easy to react and to daylight those behaviors, and they're so far from what the norms are for people of my generation. And whereas people of my generation have grown up and been exposed to sexual misconduct and sexual misbehavior in some form or another our entire lives. So while it's absolutely wrong and not appropriate, it's not such a foreign and egregious concept to us that it exists, if that makes sense.
No, that was well said.
That's well said. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. I mean, as outraged as people want to be, it's been always there. You're right.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, sexual misconduct and sexual abuse are like wallpaper. We've been walking by it every day for most of our lives. But the white supremacy is kind of new on there.
Yeah. Even though I would argue that it's been subtly there all that long, and I think our eyes are being opened to it more now. But I do see what you're saying. In terms of the economic and leadership and everything else, how did you feel Notley presented herself?
I think she missed the boat on that one. People are looking for. She knows that jobs and economy are top of mind of Albertans. That's what all the polls are saying. That's what everyone is hearing. And I think she could have done something better to try and put forth her economic plan better. I correct me if I missed it, but I didn't get a sense of what her plan is.
Yeah, part of the problem, and I mean, Stephen Mandel faces this as well, because his some aspects of his economic agenda have been good, but some have been incoherent. But the Notley economic plan has been panned by economists. It's not realistic. It relies on unrealistic projections for what the price of a barrel of oil is going to be. It is predicated on us growing our non-renewable resource revenue by 125% and not putting a dime of it into savings, putting it all into operations. And then on top of that, having to freeze the budget, the whole of government spending for 3 years. And it's just not rooted in reality. And then on top of that, you layer the billions of dollars worth of promises that they've made. And there's just no logical way to pay for it without taking on massive deficit and debt or massively increasing taxes. And given how effective the UCP and Jason Kenney have been with driving the lie that they didn't talk about putting in a carbon tax in the last election, I think there's a reasonable amount of apprehension that the NDP would explore, consider putting in a sales tax and or increasing taxes in other areas. And people, even though we are the lowest tax jurisdiction in Canada, we have become accustomed to having Cadillac services with very low taxes on the back of very high non-renewable resource revenues. And the cost of living is really high, and a lot of families are struggling right now. And the thought of losing an extra 50 or $100 a month would put some people over the edge. And right or wrong, it is what it is. And so I just don't think that there's a credible plan to either pay for the things she's promising, get the budget back to balance, or to rein in spending in a way that makes sense. And it's one thing that Jason Kenney was right on. We need to grow the economy in order to pay for these things. It's something he is absolutely right on.
Kenny talked a little bit about something when it came to the environment. And I'm trying to remember exactly how he said it, but it just popped in my mind. He said he didn't use the word carbon tax, but what he was kind of referencing to sounded like a carbon tax.
Well, he does intend to keep the old PC carbon tax.
Yeah.
So it was the SGER. Do you remember what that stands for, Robbie?
Special gas. Just hang on. I always mess it up, but
the SGER.
Specified gas
emitters regulation.
Emitters
regulation. Yeah.
Okay, so that was brought in 2007, and it's essentially been a carbon tax on large emitters for 12 years. So that's always existed. My justification for the carbon tax actually came from the survey that the NDP sent out when they were talking about their climate leadership plan and asked for feedback from Albertans. So I did take that survey, and one of the questions that it asked me, and this was something that I had to agree with, because it said, should businesses be solely responsible for the reduction in GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions? And we were fresh off of the election. The big thing that Rachel Notley campaigned upon was it shouldn't just fall to individuals to pick up this slack of a downturn in the economy. Businesses should also see an increase in their tax rate. And Albertans agreed that actually, she was absolutely in tune at that time with what Albertans were thinking. And so we were fresh off of this, that businesses were going to get an increase in their taxes because it wasn't fair. So when I read that question, I was like, well, I would be a hypocrite to say, yes, they should be solely responsible for it. So I said, no, they shouldn't. Because, and what I learned later on in 2018, I believe it was June, I went to an Eco-Fiscal Commission panel, and they were discussing energy and the environment. Steve Williams, former CEO of Suncor, was there. And one of the things that he said was that production is responsible for about 20% of emissions. 80% of emissions come from consumers. So again, I mean, it made sense to me. Like we emit we're using these products. And until the demand for those products actually goes down, they're going to keep producing them. Right? It's like cigarettes. Until the demand goes down, they're not going to stop producing them. So, yes, it may be detrimental to people's health, and that's why you pay the tax on a package of cigarettes that you do. And the reason that you pay the extra tax on it is because chances are you will have more effect on healthcare because of your decision to smoke. And I mean, we're not, it doesn't feel like Alberta's really at the point where they can, oh, let's just switch to this green energy. We're not, we're kind of behind when it comes to that way of thinking. So it, it's been kind of a slow process of, hey, these are things that I do, these are things that I use, this is how I use this energy that is particularly, um, expensive. So yeah, I don't know. And the environment things, they're more difficult for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly, yeah, it's certainly interesting to kind of what she's trying to balance, which I think a lot of people want, and what is possible is certainly, it's a challenge. And
But I've run into a lot of people. I've been door knocking, and I've run into people that have said, I don't I don't hate the carbon tax. We need to start paying for what we're doing. So it hasn't been a lot of people. I'm not going to say that, but it is. I think it is changing people's minds. It's going to be a slow process, of course, but it was working.
I don't like, maybe I'm sitting out here in Fuzzy Wuzzy by the beach,
Had a
BC.
carbon tax for 10 years already.
Yeah, and we just had an increase here, and gas is at $3 million, and they're blaming Horgan and all of that. But like, from where I could be wrong, but and considering the transplanters that have went to Alberta from all over the place that had a provincial sales tax of some kind, I think this idea of a tax, I don't think is going to get people as angry or as frustrated. There may be some anger at first, but I think once they see that there could be some benefit, I don't think that there would be a lot of anger at the end.
I agree because look what Klein did. Klein managed to get buy-in. He had an 8% surcharge on individual taxes. He he increased um, business taxes, corporate income tax, from 6% to 12.4% in 1 year. So he effectively 100 plus, it was over 100% that he increased that. Over his first 2 years up until 2000, he actually held it, or sorry, he increased it up to 14.5%. Why? Because we needed to pay down the debt. But what he had was buy-in. He had a buy-in from Albertans to say, I don't want this debt. I'm willing to pay for it. Let's get rid of it. But Klein also did cut, and his cuts hurt people.
Mm.
Right? And that's really the unfortunate thing. I think that any government is really tasked with is that they when they make cuts to social programs, and I hear people talk about these as luxury items. Well, for people who need them, they are not luxury items. They are actually what keep them from being homeless each year or each month. They're things that actually help them to get out of bed in the morning. Unfortunately, we look at them as, well, this is an expense. Yes, it is. But Klein's cuts hurt people. And so there's some people who, yes, they look back to Klein and they say, well, eventually everything worked out. We paid down the debt. Things were prosperous. Yeah, they were.
I think the thing with Klein, and I moved here in 1995 from BC, but the perception I got coming here was that everybody understood that the province was at a bit of a crossroads after the Getty years. And that in order to get the province back on track and get its balance sheet in shape, everybody was going to have to share the load. And so that's why you got that buy-in for, you know, putting in healthcare premiums and paying for school and all these things that are kind of counterintuitive to conservative ideology, but it was all of the province was really focused on if everybody suffers a little bit, then we put the province into a good place and then we can all enjoy the good times. The problem is that when the good times came and the deficit and debt were retired, Ralph Klein decided to send out Ralph Bucks and had that same sort of mentality of having fiscal discipline and then starting to intelligently reinvest into the deficit that was established for infrastructure, we would be in a lot better place. But unfortunately, by that time, they were a little bit devoid of ideas and thought that the better route was to go about buying people's votes with checks. Thank you, Mr. Klein. I really appreciated my $400 when I was 16 years old and took it and bought my very first cell phone.
Yeah, it was such a like. I mean, in one sense, I agree with Deirdre, but in another sense, I actually kind of disagree because I think there was a lot of people that really got angry with what Ralph Klein did because there was so much that ended up being hurt that didn't need to happen. And in a lot of ways, you could argue, some would argue that Alberta is behind because of what Ralph Klein ended up doing. And if there was a little bit more prudence and thought to what he did, maybe Alberta would be in better shape now.
Totally. And like I said, I think that the missing piece was the transition from when we retired the debt and the economy started to take off. What did we do with that windfall? And instead of putting it into savings or investing into infrastructure, we crapped it away by sending checks to everybody.
Yeah. For some reason, I didn't get a check at that time, but whatever. But that's neither here nor there. The other thing that I think Notley, and I think all the leaders other than dropped the ball on this, there was no conversation, and this has been a huge talking point and criticism about the UCP campaign around the overtime rules. That was I was just thinking about how that did not come up, and I was surprised that no one brought that up at all.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that it didn't come up. That having been said, I didn't have it on my top list of issues. So.
Well, maybe it wasn't. I was just thinking because there were a lot of it felt like there was some frustration and at least some confusion around the overtime rules that Notley didn't really take advantage of. I didn't think.
And I would agree with you. I think that would have been something as a Labour Party that she really could have capitalized upon, because it was what do I want to say? It was a shock. It wasn't a shock when it first happened. I know this because I watched the Facebook Live and I sent out a tweet and crickets. And it just hit, 3 days ago, Robbie?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it all of a sudden just went nuts. And I'm like, okay, where were all you people 2 weeks ago when he first announced it? And maybe because it wasn't actually written down yet, but yeah, they were not impressed. And I think she really could have capitalized upon that because it can be abused.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. That's why they changed it. That was why they did it in the first place. So that would have been something absolutely that she would have been able to defend with some strength behind her.
Yeah, she wasn't in her sharpest form today.
Let's finally get to Kenny. Maybe we're all like, oh, Kenny, but let's try to put our let's be fair here. What worked for Kenny here? What did he do well?
The thing that stood out for me, and it's a strength of Jason's all along, is that he's very effective at driving home a message. And so you heard lots about the Notley-Trudeau alliance. You heard lots about the carbon tax going. You heard a lot about jobs, economy, and pipelines. And so for Mr. Kenney, he's very effective at creating a narrative and driving it. And I think he did that and did it very effectively. And it's part of why he's likely to be our next premier.
Don't cry. You can do this, Deirdre. Did we lose her?
Oh. Yeah, I think we might have lost her.
Okay. I will. Nope.
No, you didn't lose me. Sorry, I had myself on mute and I forgot to take myself off.
Oh.
So what? So I'm going to deliver a bit of a backhanded compliment. Is that I think conservatives in general are very good at sticking to their messages. It is absolutely something that I look at and think, or that I watch on a regular basis, and I'm almost jealous at. And I mean, we're talking long game here. We're talking things that were said 3 years ago that they decided this is the way we're going to use this, and they do for years and years and years. It never falters. It's really impressive. So I'm, what I think that he did well was that I think he absolutely held Notley to account. I don't know that he said anything that I found really, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, triumphant. Like I didn't hear anything amazing from him, but I think he relatively held his own. It was just that was just cringy between him and Notley anyway. So I that's a tough one.
I think that was part of it. He didn't have the math is hard moment. He didn't have the there wasn't. He didn't have that slip up that I think maybe the Notley was hoping for. That slip up didn't happen. He said I agree with you. He called some things into account. I think that he didn't say anything spectacular. He kept to his talking points. But I actually think it wasn't really what Kenny did. It's what everyone else didn't do that made Kenny look better than he did. Mm-hmm. In my mind, I don't like he didn't he was able there was no moment where he was taken off script here tonight. There was no moment where he was challenged at any point in time. Oh,
I'm gonna assume that was Robbie's dogs.
Oh, hello, and we have some surprise guests. Some dogs will be joining us now, giving their thoughts. Actually, the dogs are kind of talking like Kenny and Notley were talking to each other, so it's no different. We got a live recording of the debate.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
I honestly I didn't really see. I think I think you're kind of right that it's what he didn't do. He was actually, he was fairly restrained. He didn't attack Notley on things that he maybe could have, but when he did do it, it was when he did attack, it was on something that was very reasonable, was something that not only, like, it wasn't just relevant to conservatives, it was kind of relevant to a lot of people. So when he attacked, it didn't seem unconventional. It didn't seem like it was personal. I mean, it was personal, but it didn't seem like it. So I think he held back until, the one thing that he could really go on, which was the MLAs accused of sexual misconduct.
And it was actually Mandel that brought that up. Kenny built on that. It wasn't him that brought it up at first. It was Mandel that did.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, so that might have actually even shielded him
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think there was any strategic value in Kenny coming in and trying to beat down Rachel Notley. Polling shows that people like her better than they like her party. She is the strength of the NDP. So if you come in there and try to be a bully or mansplain her, then you're not going to do yourself any favors. You're going to turn people off, reasonable people off. And so it was his to lose in terms of really damaging his chances for election and making Notley be a sympathetic character to voters. And so he definitely did show the restraint that he needed to, because he didn't need a knockout punch. He's sitting high in the polls. It looks like he's going to form government. He just needed to go in there and show control, and he did the bare minimum he needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
He wasn't pushed, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think they could have done a better job of pushing him into a corner where he didn't feel like he had the upper hand. But I think he absolutely held his own, and he didn't have that Jim Prentice moment, like you said. He could have come across as very condescending, and maybe he had some good debate prep, because he didn't.
Yeah. It almost felt like, I hate to say it, it almost felt like the Adler interview was a wake-up call for him, in a sense that maybe he was like, oh, I better be ready for this because they're coming. But I really liked what Connor C. Toverdrive said. If you didn't like Kenny before, you're not coming out of this not liking Kenny. But if you like Notley, you're still like there's no change, especially in the top two. And that probably is what the benefit is for Kenny, is because he didn't lose anything, but he may not get gained anything, but he didn't lose anything. And if you're in the lead, that's all you need.
Right.
That I think is the benefit for Kenny, and I think the problem for Notley, I think, going forward is how do you build on getting that support for Kenny. And I think the one other thing that I didn't particularly like that Notley did, and this was just me, this is just my personal thing. A couple of quick things. She primarily focused too much on Kenny. For one thing, I think it was that. But she used this term a couple of times, my primary opponent. And I was a little taken aback. I have to tell, I felt a little taken aback by that, because there are two other opponents in this race, and maybe they're way behind, but they're still opponents. And you still need to kind of give them a little bit of. That's just my personal thing. It's not a moral outrage, but it said to me that her main focus was Jason Kenney, and maybe it came across a little too much, but I don't know.
Well, so strategically speaking, the Liberals and the Alberta Party becoming a thing potentially creates risk for both the UCP and for the NDP. And one of the things that, in terms of like communication strategy, you never want to give a bigger platform to one of your smaller competitors. And so I think by focusing on Jason Kenney, the downside is that she looked like she was running to be the opposition leader. And that feedback comes out quite a bit. But if she started to focus on attacking the Alberta Party and the Alberta Liberals, the message she's sending is, these are the people I'm competing against.
That's fair.
And so when you look at Stephen was attacking Notley and Kenney because those are who he sees as his competitors. David Kahn was attacking all three of them. You didn't really see Stephen go after the Alberta Liberals because in Stephen's view, and if polling is to be believed, they're not really a competitor for the Alberta Party at this time. What the Alberta Party is trying to do is piggyback and leapfrog over the NDP and potentially the UCP. Although I did notice towards the end that Notley did start to kind of hone in on Stephen a little bit, and I found that interesting.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's possible as well, that she learned from what happened in the 2015 debate. I mean, Prentice ignored Brian Jean, put all of his focus on Rachel Notley, and you know, the entire province noticed and said that is Rachel Notley is his main opponent. So you might have to give it to her a little bit for making that strategic move to keep the focus on Jason Kenney. If the focus is between the far right and what other people view as the far left, then you know, they have to make a decision. But if you start bringing in some of those middle parties where you have the leaders saying, you know, this is a false choice, we can do both, I think that would just, you know, that would give her a two-front war where she doesn't actually have one. Or at the moment she doesn't have one. But she doesn't want to create one either.
Right.
And Jim Prentice kind of weirdly did create for himself a two-front war.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Two more just quick things, and then we'll kind of just give wrap-up thoughts. Did we miss Derek Fildebrandt?
Wow.
So I've been pretty outspoken on this. The Alberta Party had an MLA when Dave Taylor crossed the floor from the Liberals to being an independent to becoming an Alberta Party MLA. And their leader at that time in the next general election was not included in the debates. Greg Clark was not included in the debates last time, despite finishing a very strong second in a by-election and having reasonable polling numbers and a reasonable number of candidates across the province. So talking to some people I know in media, the filter that they had applied or used for the debate this year was any party that had representation that was elected under that banner that still held seats at the dissolution. So that would be the Alberta Party, the Alberta Liberals, the NDP, and the UCP, who had elected MLAs under those banners. I understand why the NDP would want Derek there, because he would act as a foil to the UCP, and it would give him a little bit more exposure to knock off some of those libertarian conservative votes that maybe are parked with the UCP right now. But I believe that it would be a disservice to the debate and to voters to do that, because it makes a bit of a mockery of it. And there should be a basic standard that does apply, even though there isn't one. as to who is included in the debates. Because what would have happened if Robin Luff decided to start her own party? And if Karen McPherson and Rick Fraser decided to start their own parties and Prab Gill started his own party, are we then going to have 15 or 20 different debates with these people who have left their caucuses and started their own parties? I don't think that that's reasonable. And yes, that's a little bit extreme because there is only Derek, but I think that a barometer of having enough broad appeal to be able to at least elect a single MLA under your banner should kind of be the Greens feed before you're included in a debate.
I, of course, miss Derek Hildebrandt. On the one hand, I don't know that he would have added anything. I think he would have been a fantastic shield for Rachel Notley, because I think that Derek would have attacked better. And by better, I mean Derek would have attacked on conservative views. And that's something that I don't think any other party really did to Jason Kenney. So, that was my issue to begin with, is that without Derek in that debate, Jason Kenney was the most conservative option. And it would have forced Kenney to defend some of his less conservative stances with Derek in the debate. So I guess if you're a conservative, I think you missed out on having Derek there, because you maybe have a false impression of Jason Kenney as being as conservative as he says he is. And I think Derek would have shown that better than the other parties could have, because they're not sitting where Jason Kenney is trying to, his net is trying to catch a wide variety of right-leaning votes, and I think Derek would have really contested that. So I think it was more conservatives that lost out, Rachel Notley supporters that lost out on having Derek Hildebrandt in the debate.
I think he would have been an entertaining option. I do see both sides of the argument, though.
And that,
yeah. He did do some Facebook Lives that you can go and check out, though, if you're interested in what he had to say.
Yeah, that's actually the approach that Greg Clark took in the last general, because he wasn't invited, is he answered the questions as they were asked in a Facebook Live. So good on Derek for doing that. And I think Derek adds value to the legislature. I hope he wins. But I just think that he needs to be able to show that there is an element of viability before he's taken seriously and included in debates.
Yeah, fair. How did you feel that the debate was moderated?
Awfully. I know it's challenging with big personalities up there. The moderator probably should have had a microphone kill switch. And it's just challenging when you've got 4 leaders up there that are trying to get their message across and doing so in a very limited time. It's challenging, and especially with only one debate. So given the circumstances and the amount of time she had, I thought she did the best that she could, but perhaps maybe having a couple of debates that are similar to like what the US is, where there's a theme or a thread that connects them, and having everybody involved that way and stretching them out a little bit more might make more sense, because then you can go a little bit deeper into policy and getting to know the leaders. But all things considered, I think she did a good job with the hand she was dealt.
Yeah, I thought it was done quite well with, like Robbie said, big personalities that really they had no intention of stopping. So I think they did all right. One of the things that I would agree with is that if you want to get into some of the bare bones of the policies and of their plans, you really do need to have more than one debate.
Mm.
And I kind of agree that doing something like one debate a week, and one debate might be on healthcare and education, one debate might be on the economy. I think that you would get a lot more from them, because putting them into, 45-second statements with a rebuttal, it's really not long enough to get to know what these parties actually stand for.
Yeah. I do agree it would have been nice to have an extra debate. And even it would be one of the things I think would be really interesting is if it's not necessarily a leader debate, but another MLA from the party debate. Like you bring in like the potential, I know that they do the VP debate in the States, but the deputy premier debate. Like it would have been, so we would have heard from Sarah Hoffman or whoever Kenny would have had or Mandel would have had or Khan would have had. And
I
just would
like
it would just bring something different to the table, because that's part of the problem is if you don't know who your MLA is, you're voting for your MLA, you're not voting for the leader, but it
hmm
just gets to know some other people in the party, and it's good practice, I think. But
And it also would give you an idea of who the parties are thinking would be good choices. So I think you would actually get more insight by seeing who they would send to those debates.
yeah,
Because, yeah, I mean, honestly, if Mark Smith would have shown up to the education debate before Mark Smith, like that would have been, but that would have been major,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, yeah, it might. I like that idea, because I think it would give a lot more insight into what your cabinet might look like, and who you're relying on in your party
yeah,
to take on these positions. Because I mean, honestly, like we have no idea.
yeah.
We've got a little bit of an idea with Rachel Notley, but for everybody else, we have absolutely no idea who they would want to put in these positions. And I think that might be something that maybe could sway voter intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you would get an idea not only of who the leader is, but also who those individuals are that might be heading those departments. So I like it.
Is there anything that before we close off here? Is there anything that you did want to talk about that we did not bring up?
No, I think we've more or less covered it. I thought I didn't think that there was a clear winner. I think the top two for me were definitely Stephen Mandel and David Kahn. I thought that they exceeded expectations, and I was disappointed with Rachel Notley and Jason Kenney. But overall, definitely not a game changer in terms of the debate.
I
Anything?
would agree. I didn't see anything that I actually finished watching the debate with kind of a ho hum kind of feeling. And when I was looking at the polls, who won the debate, and I'm like, I don't think I can say any one person actually won that debate. Like there was, I don't think there was a standout of one individual. But I would also agree with Robbie that I think the Alberta Party put forward an excellent view, and so did the Liberal Party. The NDP and sorry, Rachel Notley and Jason Kenney. I think in a way, I think they played it safe.
So the unscientific poll that I put on Twitter was, which leader impressed you the most tonight? There are, as of this point, 305 votes. 44% went with Stephen Mandel, 32% went with Rachel Notley, 15% are going with David Kahn, and 9% went with Jason Kenney. I would probably go Mandel, Kahn, 1-2, and I'd probably go three Kenney, 4 Notley. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble on Twitter, aren't I? Oh, I'm doomed. I'm done.
You've kicked the hornet's nest.
Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. Because because there's lots to happen. What do you guys have going on coming up? What are you guys up to as the election continues?
Well, we're going to attempt to record our next podcast episode tomorrow morning, I think. And then really, I'm looking for the Alberta Party to drop the remainder of its platform. The NDP and the UCP have done that. I'm not sure whether the Alberta Liberals are going to do that. And I've been doing some freelance consulting with the campaign. So we'll kind of be looking at continuing to do that work, and just really looking forward to an exciting last week. I think that we're going to really see the rhetoric and the, I don't know about insults, but maybe insults is the best way to put it. Opposition research, the really nasty stuff is going to come starting tomorrow, and put your seatbelts on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to get a little nastier. I'm looking at. I mean, I'm just looking at trying to keep up with everything that's going on. Jeff Callaway's request for an injunction this week. All of these things kind of take a little bit more time. So yeah, I'm hoping. I'm looking forward to our recap of this week because it's actually been a really big week. So, and I'm looking forward to next week as well because yeah, I think there is more to drop. I don't know if it's going to sway anyone, but at the same time, like I said earlier today, um, I think there's people who might not have these issues top of mind. They're not really what their biggest focus is, but how much is too much? When Ryan Jesperson said I've got 25 candidates deep, when like is 26 the number, is 27, is 28, like at what point do people start saying, you know what, this is too much? So they might have worked on the desensitization of having these mini bozo eruptions every freaking almost every, I'm sorry, it wasn't actually every, but almost every nomination race that they had, there was a bozo eruption, but it desensitized people. I honestly think that to a point that was, um, I think that was intentional, so that they wouldn't have the 2012. All of a sudden, this is an issue. No, no, yeah, we're used to this. This just keeps happening, but it is kind of at the point now where this is too much, right? One or two or three or four, 24, but we're getting into some big numbers here, and it is becoming too much. So I honestly still can't say that I know what's going to happen. And that's a tough place to be in when you're this engaged and being able to say I don't know what's going to happen, because I think more is coming, and I think anything could still happen in the last week before election day.
I also believe and know from I have a source that is telling me that it's going to get a lot worse than it has from both sides. So beyond like there, so yeah, I think what's going to be really interesting too is the amount of engagement that people are people going to be actually fatigued by this, or are people going to stay engaged? Because this has been one of the nastiest elections that I have seen in a long time, and it's like, yeah,
It's kind of exhausting.
it has been to the point I was like, oh my gosh, like
I've had naps the last 2 days in a row, and I woke up feeling like just this wasn't helpful. And there's still 12 days left.
yeah.
Yeah. No, totally. And I mean, I'm very politically engaged, and I'm exhausted, and I want to take a whole year off of politics.
And is it because I think it probably is, but it's because we are so engaged, right, Robbie? Like that's why this is just really starting to weigh on you because there's so much going on. There's so much to parse through that it's not yet reached the point of overwhelming, but like I said, there's 12 days left. So to be at this stage and there's still almost 2 weeks left, it's kind of a tough spot. And the whole thing, I'm sorry, I have to say this, but the whole thing with our advanced polls that you can vote anywhere in the province, and that's really fantastic for convenience. But the idea that we might not know who our government is until the end of April is just absolutely unbelievable to me.
That is confusing to me. I have read that too, and I was like, that cannot be true.
It has to do with getting the votes from the advanced polls and then putting them into the polls they're supposed to be in, and there's really not a ton of time between because it depends on how many people show up, right? If you have a lot of people going into advanced polls, that's going to take them a long time to sift through and organize where these votes are actually supposed to be and then get them into the polls. Yeah, I'm so not impressed about that because, in 2015, we knew who our government was the next morning, and there were some tight races. There, according to polling right now, there could be a ton of tight races, and we might have to wait. I'm not happy.
Well, and you know that the losing party is going to cry foul.
Oh, everyone's going to cry foul about this. Like, it's going to be kind of chaotic if we don't know with 100% certainty who our government is on April 17th. It's going to be chaotic until we do, because yuck, it's just yuck.
Yeah, I'm with you on. I don't particularly. I don't know what to think of it, but it feels it's just yeah.
It feels wrong, right? Yeah.
I think the good thing is that it's quite likely that the political dynasties of yore are not going to be the norm in the future. So
I know that's actually interesting too, because Alberta has never, ever, ever had a one-term government. Like that's never happened before. So there are so many things that are just historically exciting about what's going on right now, because what if we ended up with a one-term government? What would happen? And will we become a two-party state with like, oh,
I'm still predicting a minority. I am sticking with my guns. I may be one of 7 people that believe in fairy tales and unicorns or whatever, but I am believing in a minority government.
I'm with you. I'm hoping for a minority government. I'm hoping for the BC look, but instead of Liberals, NDP with a Green Party kicker. I'm hoping for UCP, NDP, and an Alberta Party kicker. I think that would allow us the most balanced possible government going forward, where it wouldn't alienate half of the province. I think that's my biggest worry is that half of the province is going to be alienated, and it doesn't matter which half that you're on, but if you don't win, um, yeah, we've never had this before, and I would like to see a minority government with an Alberta Party kicker to keep the peace and keep the balance between them. I think we could end up with something very successful if we had that.
well, I think when you look at places like Nova Scotia and British Columbia, third parties playing a bigger role in government is kind of the norm and seems to be what we're transitioning towards. And so I think that that's quite possible given Stephen's debate performance today and the trends that are occurring with respect to polling and the controversies that have been popping up with the UCP. So
Yeah. Well, we will see about that. So check out the R&D podcast, the political R&D podcast. It's coming up this week. Follow me at KVOLE, KevinOlenek.com. Subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. Thanks for staying up late and having dogs bark and putting kids to bed and joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us again, Kevin.
All right, and we will talk to everyone very soon. Bye for now.
Sounds great.